welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Have you ever felt like you have a story deep inside you that's just waiting to be told, but you don't know where to start? Or perhaps you've been told countless times, you should write a book, but the idea of putting pen to paper seems overwhelming. You're not alone. Many of us have a narrative just yearning to be shared, yet the path to bringing it to life often feels unclear and probably a little daunting. Storytelling is a fundamental part of our human experience. It's how we connect, how we learn, and how we grow. Whether it's through writing, art, or any other creative medium, the stories we tell have the power to inspire and transform. But where do we begin? How do we shape our ideas into a cohesive and compelling narrative? And once we start, how do we keep the momentum going? Well, today we're going to dive into the art of storytelling and the creative process behind it. We'll explore the challenges and the triumphs of bringing this story to life, whether you're working solo or as part of a team. We'll discuss the importance of collaboration, the value of a strong framework, and how to navigate the often complex journey from idea to finished product. Our guest today is someone who has dedicated his life to helping others tell their stories. Bill Blankschaen is a master storyteller with a passion for drawing out the unique narratives within each of us. With a background that spans from being a pastor to leading a thriving Christian school, Bill eventually found his true calling in the world of storytelling and founded Story Builders. His mission is to help others live a story worth telling, and his expertise in the creative process is invaluable. Bill's journey is not only about storytelling, but also about transformation and finding one's true path. So whether you're looking for practical advice on writing a book, seeking inspiration for your next creative project, or simply interested in hearing a compelling story of personal and professional growth, Bill has insights that are going to resonate with you. So get ready to be inspired and equipped with the tools you need to tell your own story. So Bill, welcome to the show and thanks for being here.
Well, Jen, what a privilege it is to be here. I love the idea of a podcast dedicated to creatives because my whole life has become about creativity. It's one of our core values, and how do you help foster that and encourage that? So I love what you're doing here, and it's just a privilege to be here with you.
Well, thanks. No, I think everybody is creative in some form or fashion. You know, I had this conversation with somebody a few weeks ago where starting as babies, right? We are constantly watching them come to figure out how to solve a problem with whatever creative solution pops into their little baby brains. You know,
Right.
how do I get this to this? You know, like how do I make this happen? And so all of us have creativity inside of us. Sometimes we just need other people to kind of draw it out of us a little bit and help us figure out how to use that creativity.
Sure.
And so I'm excited to dive into that conversation. But
Sure.
first, let us get to know you and maybe a little bit about your background and when you realized storytelling became your calling.
Great question. I don't know if I can go back to being a baby and identify it then, but it was pretty early on. And I think this is an important point that I've tried to teach my own children about this, is that I think all of us pretty early on have a good sense of our strengths and the things that we're passionate about. And creativity is certainly one of them. I know I saw one study that said that kind of measured children's creativity. And by the age, it was super high. And by the age of 7, it had plummeted. Right. So once they start engaging with other people in the world and getting feedback about that, we almost start self-censoring our creativity. And so by the time we get to adulthood, for many people, that creativity has just, it lives in a little box over on the shelf somewhere that they pull it out. They don't think of themselves as creative. They don't think of it. And it is a tragedy because I'm with you. I believe everybody is created to be incredibly creative. And we have this power within us. It doesn't matter your background, doesn't matter. None of that matters. We all have it. And some are in circumstances where it's more intentionally cultivated than others. And so for me, I was, I grew up in a wonderful environment, but I suffered that same curve of, hey, we have this creativity and imagination, and yet over time it just gets pushed into the box. But from I remember my teenage years, I would read voraciously. I mean, constantly, I would read the cereal box 10 times of every morning, right? So I loved reading. I would just suck up big books. I just thought everybody could do that. It took me many years to realize that's actually a gift, a unique talent that I had in that regard. And then being creative, I always loved stories and storytelling. So, that led to my pursuing degrees in English and history. Let's write and the stories we can write about. And I didn't really fully understand that connection. It was just what I loved. But then life happened, Right. And that happens for a lot of people. Like you become an adult, and I met a wonderful woman who became my wife. We had kids, and, it's like, well, we got to pay the bills, and you're dealing with those things. And I think that's such a pivotal chunk of life, those upper teenage years, early adult years, where we make decisions. And if we can be intentional about those decisions to protect our creativity, we won't have to have some kind of wake up session decades later and try to reconnect with that. Right. And so for me, from a very early age, I was all about that, all about storytelling. I just hadn't figured out how that fit with the rest of the world, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I am that person that I was creative as a younger person. As a child, my imagination ran wild all the time. I could have full on conversations with invisible friends, and like it was the best day I'd
Yeah.
ever spent.
Yes.
I loved writing really bad poetry and that kind of thing. But it was always a matter of you did that at home, you did that away from prying eyes. You didn't want to
Mm,
stand out. You didn't want to be the different
mm,
kid who had that imagination because that might make you look weird. And so that
mm.
was something that I struggled with until probably 3 or 4 years ago when I finally said, what am I doing? Why does it take us 40 years to figure out who we are in life? But it does, because
Yeah.
so many people, we listen to those voices and
Yeah. Yeah.
we let them determine who we
Right.
are.
Right. Well, and I love what you said. It took you that long, something about to realize that you were weird, right?
Yeah.
And I think we all need to get past that fact, because each one of us is weird. Everybody's weird,
Yes.
right? And we go along through life trying not to be the weird one, and yet we're all the weird ones, right? We're all unique
Yes.
in that way. And the sooner we stop trying to fit in, the sooner we start standing out because of our strengths and lean into that. I was just giving that advice to my kids, actually. Somebody else had asked me the question, what's the thing you would most tell your younger self if you could go back? That kind of question. I said, well, there's actually two things, but one of them is lean in to those things that you love, into that writing, that creativity. Don't run from that. Lean into it, whatever. Even though you don't fully know what that means, lean into it. Don't abandon it, so you don't have to come back many years later to do that.
100%. And that's my child she is very unique. She's like a little unicorn, and she looks and just like her dad and has a lot of his temperament. She
Mm,
acts a lot like me and is creative off the charts and talented off the charts. And she's 14, and I'm like, I don't know where half of that creativity came from. But
mm,
when she was little, she would always, she wanted to have these imaginary conversations. She was always playing, and her outfits were like the loudest part about her whole world. Like what she wore just made you go, "That's Hayes." Like that's her. There was that. She had her own style,
right,
and
right,
she
right.
always wore a crown. There was always a crown involved. There had to be a headband or a crown because that was her imagination.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
for the longest time, I kept trying. I would try to, well, do we really want to wear that today? And I would try to kind of quash that a
Mm,
little bit. And then I don't remember what day it was when she came out dressing like a normal person. I went, no, 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 no. At least put a crown on. Like
right,
I
right,
was like,
right,
no, I
right.
saw the change. And I thought,
Totally.
I don't want to be that person that says you can't be you. Like,
Yeah,
live
yeah,
your
yeah,
weird, kid. Live
yeah,
your weird.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I think the time we have 6 kids, by the way, so I've been through this, and I've run a schools, so I've encountered all kinds of kids at every level. I think one of the things that we have to remember is that each of us is weird, but being our authentic self doesn't just
Yes.
mean it's all about me. It's all about, I'm just going to be weird and the rest of the world will have to conform to me.
Right.
It's figuring out the rest of how does my weird fit in and actually help other people in the world, right?
Yes.
And not be, because we've all encountered people like that who call themselves creatives. Really, that's kind of a disguise for I'm just a selfish jerk doing whatever I want
Ooh.
to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what I want to do with my creativity, right? So I want to figure out how can I use my skills and talents to actually be helpful to people and engage
Yes.
them in an authentic way, right? And that's I think authenticity is the key, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
it's not about bending yourself to conform to somebody else because that's what they want. It's about, hey, what am I really trying to accomplish here? And how can I use my creativity to make the world a better place with whatever creativity I'm doing, whatever that medium is, and however that is, because it isn't just book people, right? It's engineers, it's architects, it's
Yes.
chemists, it's whatever. It's bringing that creativity to wherever your passion lies.
Yes, I love that. And so many people, thinking about we all have a story to tell and we have something to contribute to the world, and a lot of people are told you should write a book. Well, I don't think that's always necessary to share a
Sure.
story that you have. Like not everybody can write a book. And that may not be their calling. So, what are some other ways that we can become storytellers and share the story we've been given?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when people come to us and they tell us that, like, hey, people have said I should write a book. I've been thinking about writing a book. I think I should write a book. We don't just presume they're correct, right? We start in the place of tell us about yourself. Let's hear your story. Is the timing right? I was just texting with a friend of mine. We've actually helped him with a couple books right now, but he has big plans. He wants to make the New York Times list down the road, and he's thinking 5 years ahead, which is smart. And we're going to get together and strategize around some of that. But most people aren't that intentional. They just think I should write a book. All right, I guess I should write a book. And what we help people do is, let's back up 3 steps and ask those questions of where you really want to go. Is this really the right fit for you? If it is, great. Maybe we can help you do that. If not, let's get out of your way and you can go a different direction. So books, we can talk about the power of books and why they're unique, but there are other ways to do that. Right. So some people might start a video blog or YouTube channel or something, put it in video. Some people might get into speaking because they want to be on the stage and in the moment, or even virtual speaking events and so forth, and have that more interaction with the crowd. We work with people like John Maxwell, for example. He's of course been a speaker for decades, right? His thing is being on the stage. He loves the person-to-person interaction and so forth. And that's why he has a writer who writes the books, right? He gives the ideas. It's about delegating strengths and putting them to use. It's still John's ideas and all that.
Mm-hmm.
What we've done is come alongside his company. We create all the IP and workshops and trainings and all that kind of stuff in and around it. But everybody has their own strengths, right? So don't try to be John. Don't try to be, this person or that person. Figure out what works for you. And books are a tried and true. I mean, we're talking millennia here. Medium to do that. But you're right. They're certainly not the only medium. And you got to understand where their strengths is, where their weaknesses are, and what works best for you.
Absolutely. I was talking to somebody earlier today that she said, you've got over 3 million books a year coming out. Those books get lost in the noise anyway. They're fiction, nonfiction, whatever. So if you don't want your voice to get lost, maybe don't write a book, or maybe write a book, but add to that and diversify your portfolio, if you will, like your creative portfolio.
Sure.
So what is it that Story Builders offers those looking to become better storytellers?
Sure. Well, our sweet spot is books, all things books related, first of all. So we like to say we tell stories that make the world a better place. And that happens primarily by coming alongside people to create compelling books and engaging learning experiences that help turn those ideas that people have into greater impact, influence, and income. And so books are a big piece of that. We can do everything from you come to us, you got a manuscript, I want to get it up into print and out into the world. We can help you do that, story activation, all the way to story creation, which is we will do the writing alongside you, right? Get your ideas, pull them out of you, write them in your voice, and publish a book with your name on it, right? And it's your book and it's your idea and your heart behind it and so forth. But we can take up, because not everybody's a writer.
Right.
And so we can do, and everyone, or we can coach people in between. On the other side, though, those learning experiences is once you have the book and have those ideas, can we monetize those in better ways? Can we create a digital course? Can we create a workshop experience or a training event, or any number of ways that we can take that, turn it into a keynote speech, or different things that you want to do to make money on it? Because I think a lot of people think incorrectly. Again, I'm talking about nonfiction books, by the way.
Yeah.
They think incorrectly about them and think I need to make a lot of money on the sale of the book, rather than seeing the book as the opener to making a lot of money in other ways and other services. And that's really how we need to see it, as a signature piece that really defines your ideas, fleshes out those ideas, gives you some intellectual property, some IP that you can then build around in some really constructive and powerful ways. So thinking from that point of view, so that's really the core of what we do and our focus of how do we tell those stories well.
I like that because a lot of people do have really great ideas. But for instance, and this is not something that I'm really looking to do with, because I have my own books that I'm working on. But I do like tips of the day for if you want to be the best podcast guest you could possibly be for newbies who've never done it. On TikTok, I've got these little short 45-second videos that say, hey, this is how you could do it. I had somebody say, why don't you put this into a book? And I'm like, it's a great idea. I think it is very necessary that people understand how to be a great podcast guest, but it's not something that I want to do. But taking an idea like that, I don't have the time. So coming to you and saying, hey, let's make this happen,
Yeah. Absolutely, you can. I don't know that would be the best fit. If you're working with something for which the content could change dramatically, like what's hot in social media, I don't know that that's the best fit necessarily. But that we do that all the time too. People have, hey, I'm sitting on all this content. Can I turn it into a book? Yeah, let's figure out how to make that happen. Because remember, books aren't just reading. Right. It's audio, it's ebook, it's a number of different formats that even just goes into. As you probably know, Audible books are just exploding, right, in terms of their popularity. So, but yeah, to your point, there are a lot of great ideas. I think the word that we like to use is we like to come alongside and elevate people's ideas. They come to us with really good ideas. We turn them into really great and mind-blowingly awesome ideas, right? And that's the feedback we get from everybody that works with us is, man, I came in here and I was thinking this and I came out off the charts. This is amazing. I never could have done it without you, that kind of thing. So we again, that's all about creativity and freeing that creativity to come to the plate. And that hasn't been accidental on our part, right? That doesn't just happen. So.
No, I like it. It's kind of like, for me, I write good books. And if I said otherwise, that would be really sad, but I write good books. But when I send it to my editor after my first draft, I have an even better book. Working with people and collaborating like that can take an idea from a 5 to a 10, like it does. It elevates it for sure.
Yeah.
So there are those who should write a book. Okay. There are those who should go out there and write a book, but they feel really overwhelmed by the process. So what advice would you give to someone just starting out on their writing journey?
First, just starting out in your writing journey. And I want to refresh, most of my writing input is going to be around nonfiction.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it doesn't include fiction. It just means a nonfiction genre, right? Because telling a true story in a highly creative way is often even more challenging than just making it up on our own, whatever we want.
Yeah.
We have to work within the bounds of what we're trying to do. Number one, absolutely positively. It's going to seem incredibly obvious. Right.
Yes.
Every day, right. If it's just 10 minutes a day, if it's 30, whatever it is, right. There were so many years in my life that I called myself a writer, even had it in my life purpose statement. My life purpose statement ended with these words: to write, to live, to die. I mean, that's pretty fundamental to who I thought I was. And yet I wasn't writing. And so Jeff Goins actually said this to me. He's like, when do you know if you're a writer or not? And his answer was the day you start calling yourself a writer, right? The day you're writing and you're like, I am a writer. And so even now in my email signature, the first thing it says is writer and then whatever, or, that kind of thing, because I never want myself to forget that I am a writer and I need to write, right? So I think first thing to do is actually write. Just get the practice. Don't think that someday I'll magically turn it on and start writing and so forth. So if you're wanting to write now, if you find, hey, I'm really not a writer, I know that's not my thing, then find another way to capture your ideas, maybe voice memos or something like that, to think through them. If you do think you have an idea, one really good process is to enlist some help, like myself or others. What we do is, hey, can I carve out the first part of this? We call it the story structure. And see, is there a book framework here? Is there something I have here? Can I flesh that out? And we've worked with people with this. We will do that, and then they'll go away. All right, now I got it. I'm going to work on it systematically and build it around it. So that's an option too. I think finding someone or some team to help with the editing process, right? That can give you candid feedback. That isn't just telling you what you want to hear, not to hurt your feelings or anything, or to get your money and get you out the door. But people who actually say, I don't think this is working, or what if we did this instead of that? And again, those are those authentic conversations that need to take place, that editing process that need to take place, not just in editing, but in life, for us to grow and improve. So I think a lot of that kind of stuff would be the same thing. We could go a lot of different directions from that into platform building and all kinds of things, but a lot of it's just writing, getting a plan, putting the pen to the paper, putting yourself in the chair on a regular basis and writing, whether it's typing, handwriting, whatever the case may be. And there's so many tech tools these days that make it so easy. So I think rule number one is actually write.
Yes, I mean, the old adage is you can't edit a blank page. It may be the worst thing you've ever written, but there's nothing to edit and make better if there's nothing on the page. So yes, you have to sit down. And, I have a friend that his goal is 500 words a day minimum. Like if that is what you can do, or maybe even a maximum, but like saying, I am going to write 500 words every day the best I can. I think it was good enough for Hemingway, right? Yeah. Like I think that was his method. Right. But you have to actually, if it's really something you want to do, you actually have to do the work. And that's true for anything in life, that you can't just expect it to happen.
Sure. Well, and if I remember correctly, what Hemingway did often was he would stop for a day mid-sentence. And then that would force the creativity to pick it up and finish the sentence. And now he's off and running again, right? Yes. How much of that's true? I don't know. How much of it is just, mythical legend of his style? I don't know. How much of it was he was drinking too much and forgot and told somebody else that he actually didn't do? I don't know. But whatever that was, I think it's good advice, right? Don't think that you have to have it all buttoned up and perfect. And in fact, that's probably the other advice I would give someone who's just starting out is understand that writing and editing are two different brain functions, right? So don't get caught in the trying to get it perfect the first time out. Writing doesn't begin until you have a draft. As you said, you can't do it with a blank page. You've got to get something out there, even if you're like, wow, that's horrible. Great. Now you're ready to start. You can actually work with what you have and distill it down. We have people come to us all the time with manuscripts that are bloated and wordy and a mess. And it's like, okay, awesome. We'll let's fix it and turn it into something that's actually clear and readable and helpful and all that kind of stuff. That's what, again, it's another way to elevate it. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love my editor. She's also my sister, but I love my editor because she's honest with me, and she will say, Jennifer, you don't need 130,000 words to say something 110,000 will do, and I'm like, and it hurts, but it's such a constructive criticism that I'm just like, okay, this is what I pay you for. So yes.
Who was it that gave the advice? Sometimes you have to kill your darlings.
Yes.
But I do that all the time. I tell our whole team, like, you may have thought you had a wonderful idea as we're working with authors and we present it to them and they're like, it's not really flying. It's kind of awkward. I don't get it. And it's like, okay, chuck it. It's fine. We're good. We try it. We fail and we fail forward. We try to, right? And we go and do it again. Come up with another idea. There will always be more ideas. I think that's kind of a core belief we have to have as creatives.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that was the thing, I write fiction, obviously, so it's a little bit different, but I get so attached to my story. I'm so attached to my characters. They're real to me. Nobody else is going to feel that way about them. Not as strongly as I do. Yeah. And so for me to cut it, it's like me killing my darlings. Like it is me literally taking part of my soul and saying, you're not worthy. And she said, save them in another document and hold on to them for yourself, but not everybody needs them. And I'm like, okay, great. So that's what I do.
That's true. Another thought, this is just a thought because the fiction space better than I do, is I wonder if you could treat them almost like deleted scenes or something. When you buy the book, you get access to this whole bank of things that I had that didn't make the cut.
I do that. I have.
Oh, good.
Yes, I do that. I call them deleted scenes, and they're on my website. So perfect. If you go find them or whatever, because like one of my scenes is like homecoming week in high school. It's so fun. It's exciting. It's they're having a good old time. And she's like, we don't need all that detail. And I'm like, but I need it. She said, just put it up there. Other people will enjoy it, just not while they're reading the book.
Yeah. I remember years ago, I was interviewing for a teaching position in an out-of-state school. And I went there and was talking to the person. I was really young. I was like young 20s, something like that. And the person asked me, so who's your favorite author? And I was saying a few things, and she said, well, mine's Charles Dickens. And then she asked, what do you think of Dickens? I always try to be authentic. So I said, he's one of my least favorite authors because he takes forever to describe stuff in such nauseating detail. I'm like, skipping ahead several pages. Are you done describing that table yet? Can we move on? And she was a little bit shocked by that. I'm like, well, if this is going to work, I have to be authentic with what I think. So, but I agree. I'm much more, my natural style is more succinct. Like it's more, I don't know, punchy, if that makes any sense. But
No, that's good though. I think that, and you have to have that because you will get lost in the weeds if you keep on and on and on. Like,
yeah,
I agree. I picture it in my head a certain way, so your description really doesn't mean much to me. And so I have to remind
mm-hmm.
myself that there are other readers like me, that I don't need to use
Yeah,
all the words, even
yeah,
though I have them.
yeah. But, and to be fair, there are some readers who really like that. They want to get like,
Yeah.
for instance, I'm a big fan of David McCullough's work, right? And his telling nonfiction stories in his almost kind of fictionalized way. I'm a huge fan of that. And there are many pages that I think many people would like, oh, Dave, this is so boring. And I'm reading, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. So I don't know. I don't know what the difference is between Dickens and McCullough, but I like the one and not as much the other. But everybody, there's an audience for everyone, I think. Right? You
Yes.
don't have to try to be someone else to attract an audience. Be you, and that'll prepare the audience to come to you.
100%. I think that's fantastic wisdom to just to really ponder, because I want everybody to like my books. I do. I would love for every person in the world to read my book and be like, that's the best book ever. But I also know that I don't love every book, therefore my book will not be loved by everybody. There's a
Yeah,
reality there that
yeah,
sometimes you just have to face that.
yeah. Yeah, we often have people come to us with ideas for a book, and they say, I ask them who it's for, and they say, well, everybody. It's for everybody. Everybody will like this book. And I was like, well, the book that is for everybody is a book for nobody. Like nobody will know, oh, that's me. I want to read that. If you're describing everybody, then that's not it. So even in fiction, drilling down into what's my niche, where's my focus, nonfiction, who am I talking to? I talk about it like a 3-level audience. Like who's your core audience, and then who's your secondary audience, and you're aiming for the core, but you're trying to draw in your secondary, and then you've got everybody else out there, like a broader audience that might be drawn in, might not be. But if you write for that 3rd level, you'll miss the core and end up hitting nothing.
Absolutely. And that core is the one that's going to come back for your next book and maybe your next
Right.
book, especially if you're in a series kind of thing. So, yes, knowing your target audience is huge. And so, thinking about making a story, appealing to your audience, that core audience, what elements is it that are there that every story needs to make it worth telling?
Yeah. Well, let me just walk you through the process we go through. We call it our storytelling structure. And this is just built on proven storytelling methods over thousands of years. I mean, the elements themselves are not new, but we've put them together in a way that all the content we work on, they start here. And these are guidelines. These aren't, when we say structure, it gives us structure, but then we build around them and we can move them around. And there's really kind of 5 core parts to this. The first part of any good content is what we call attention. You have to find a way to get somebody's attention, to draw them in. That's the opening line, the opening story, the opening to a chapter, the opening to a book, the opening to a blog post, whatever it is, right? How are you going to hook somebody and draw them in? And that attention part usually has to do with, what does the reader want? Asking yourself that question, because so often we write from what we're thinking without giving a thought to, what does the reader want out of this experience? Why are they reading this? What are they looking for? So that attention part comes first. The second one is tension. So attention and then tension. There needs to be a problem to solve, right? There has to, if it's a fiction book, there's got to be a challenge to overcome. There's got to be a dragon to slay. There's got to be, whatever the case may be, there has to be a problem. And often we're quick to gloss over those because we think people don't want problems. They don't want, in fiction, obviously it's more front and center, top of mind. In nonfiction, people tend to minimize that because they think, oh, I don't want to be negative, I want to be positive. But if someone isn't convinced that they have a problem, then they won't want the solution, right? So often people aren't aware of that. So attention, tension, and then connection. Connection is really, as an author, think nonfiction for a moment. As an author, I need to connect with the reader. They need to know that I understand the pain they have, I understand the challenges they face first, and 2, that I have solved those. I've figured out a solution. I can actually help them with those problems, right? So if it's a book, it's thinking about designing the book with that flow in mind. If it's a chapter, designing that within flow in mind. It could just be a single sentence. It could be a whole section of a chapter. It depends on what it is. The fourth part is the solution section. So we have attention, tension, connection, and solution. Solution is really the heart of your content. So if you're writing a nonfiction book, this is like the bulk of the book is your solution to give it to whatever it is that you're writing. If it's a blog post, it's kind of, all right, now here's the 4 steps that I can give you. Here's how you do this kind of thing. If it's social media, if it's whatever the case may be, it's doing that. One of the keys to that, by the way, is figuring out how to name your solution in a nonfiction setting, like giving it a name. Seth Godin famously said, the first thing you have to do with something is name it. When you name it, you make it something that people can talk about, think about, etc., and go from that. So naming it something, giving it some structure, that's your solution. There is a sub point to that we call application when you're getting into, it's unpacking the solution. How do you apply that in your life? Whatever the case may be. Final step of the 5-point process is action. Attention, tension, connection, solution, and then action. What do you want to do with this? Where am I going with this? Why did you tell me that? What next step do I need to take? This goes back to Stephen Covey with his advice to begin with the end in mind, right? Where are you taking the reader? I think that's helpful on the fiction front too. I've done a little bit of fiction. I intend to do more in the future. We'll see if I do or not. But where do we want to end? Right? Often some fiction writers begin, all right, how do I want the story to end, and then work backwards from there. But any writer should do that. What do I want them to do next? Am I just putting this out there and then leaving them hanging, or am I giving them some guidance on how do you process this and move forward with it? So that whole process, what that does for us is it gives us a structure to build around, right? So we're not starting with a blank page. It also allows us to componentize, break it down into small pieces, rather than staring at the blinking cursor on your screen and you're thinking, I need 120,000 words or 60,000 or whatever the case may be. It's no, let's break it down to those chunks, and then even those chunks could be broken down, if necessary, into daily writings, right? And so doing that, you can consistently over time actually write whatever it is you're wanting to write.
I think that is perfectly applicable to fiction writing as well. Like, you're going through all of these things, and like I do when I visualize a book, the day that it comes into my head, I know exactly how it's going to go to the end. Like, I know every time the ending, sometimes before I know the middle, like I know exactly how I want my story to end. And I'm like, with connection, like you want to find that time where they're going to your reader's going to fall in love with your character, and what's going to happen. They definitely face a challenge. Right. So like, it's completely applicable to the fiction world as well. And so I think even fiction authors listening will benefit greatly from that whole idea. Now, I am not an outliner. When I write, like, that to me sounds so much like an outline, but at the same time, it's a natural way that I write anyway. But if you are a person who struggles with outlining, that's a great way to outline your book and figure out, all right, if I have all these elements, then by all means, I'm going to have a story in the end. Yeah, no, I love that. So in your experience, what makes a story, if you have all of these elements, what makes a story marketable, right? Like, is it just the resonation, or what is it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's kind of 3 elements. And again, I'm going to speak to nonfiction first. Some of them are going to cross over to fiction. But first of all, you have to have a really great book. And by that, you have to have a compelling message, usually a fresh take on a compelling message. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, though. And this is what most people miss, is they undervalue their own story. And by story, I mean what's happened to you, but your experiences, your successes, your failures, the lessons you've learned, all of that, because someone else can have a very similar message, but with a different story, it comes out very differently. And it's going to resonate with different audiences differently. And so often we tend to think, I mentioned John Maxwell. It's a great example of maybe somebody has really a wealth of leadership experience that they built over the years, and they want to write a book, and they want to do coaching and consulting or speaking and all these kind of things. They think, well, John Maxwell's already written leadership books, therefore I shouldn't write leadership books. Well, that's nonsense, because John's story is John's story, and it's going to resonate with a certain audience. You are going to have a different audience that you're going to resonate with, and people are going to say, you know what, I don't really connect with John, but I connect with this guy or gal. I can actually do that. So not devaluing your own story, I think is one of the first keys to that. And so starting in that place, I think is probably the first place to go. Can you repeat the question again? I
just what
started
makes a
thinking about
story?
it.
No, yeah, what makes a story marketable? And I do
Oh
love
yeah,
what you just said. Let me just say, I love what you don't devalue
yeah.
your story. Oh,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So it starts with the story, and then a great book that actually
mhm.
fits the audience, that thinks in terms of there is an audience that might want to buy this book. That's Don Miller told me years ago. You want to find something that is similar to something that's successful out there, and yet different in a unique way, right? So you're not trying to copy it, but different. Think of so many of the popular, like even Netflix series or television series out there are, it's like Star Wars but different.
Mhm.
It's like Lord of the Rings but different. Right? So it's that kind of thinking. So great book is number one. The second thing is having an author who's willing and able to get out and talk about whatever the topic is, right? Who's willing to do podcasts, get on stage, do PR, put themselves out there on whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying everybody has to do all those things, right? But someone who's willing to be the face of the book, whether it's fiction, whatever the case may be, willing to get out there and talk about that's huge. The third element then to marketing a book is either partnering with somebody who can really help you with the book launch strategy and or implementation of that, right? Because there's a whole world of strategy that can go behind getting your book out into the world. And the time to think about that, I mentioned my friend is thinking 5 years ahead as a possible New York Times author. That's a good ramp up strategy, right? The time to be learning about that is years out before you're really looking to do that. And I'm not saying the New York Times list is the be all to end all. Every situation is different and what is actually of value to the author and to the rest of the world. So, but it's those three things. It's having a really awesome book. That's foundational for one, because you want a book that someone reads and wants to share with their friends. Second is having an author who's willing to be the face of the book and talk about it and make it their mission to share it with the world. And then third, having the strategy and implementation to put that strategy into effect to actually get it out to the rest of the world, and having the patience, be willing to play the long game in building that up.
Oh, I love that. Yes, those are all three fantastic steps that you can take. Do y'all work with books that are art, like fiction books even? Do y'all work with launching books that have already been written, or do you only work with books y'all are writing and such?
Yeah, no, great question. We are not a PR firm, right? And we provide services to help launch books that we help create. We generally don't offer them as just a standalone if somebody already has a book type of thing. Not that we wouldn't be open to having conversations about that and saying, hey, how might we even point you in directions that might be able to helpful for people to go as well. But we try to focus on the storytelling and the messaging, and then supporting books that we've created either under our own publishing imprint or with others, to help move them forward. But we try to stay in our lane and try to do best what we do best, and not try to be everything to everyone, because we just said if you try to be everything to everyone, you become nothing to nobody, right? So.
That's right. Okay, that's good. That is excellent clarification. I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure for anyone listening going, "Ooh, I want to work with them," that you have a very specific process of getting your book and project created.
We
And
do, and as I said, we're always open to help people, right? So if
yeah,
we're not a fit for somebody, we're more than happy to have a conversation and say, hey, we're not a fit, but we know these 2 or 3 other people who might be a fit, who can help you move that forward.
I love that. That's one of my goals. That's why I do this podcast, is so that I can point people in the direction of, hey, have you talked to Bill lately? Like he's got
Right.
this under, that is my creating that network of resources for creatives, because
Mm,
sometimes we just don't know what we
yeah.
need to know. And
Yeah.
so that's where this all started. All right. So are
Sure.
there any upcoming projects or books that you are particularly excited about?
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
gonna get me started on this?
Go.
Wow. Well, hey, let me just rattle off some books that our team has been working on with some
Yeah.
fantastic authors. The Outlier Mindset by Rodman Schley, Schley, just came out. He's what an incredible entrepreneur. So helping people to think and live creatively in their lives, The Outlier Mindset is an incredible book. We have a couple others coming out here shortly. A guy by the name of Brock Mealer. Brock has just an incredible story of healing, hope, endurance, recovery from tragedy. And it's just such an inspirational read. That's going to be coming out later this year through our own Storybuilders Press publishing imprint. We have other ones coming out. We do a lot of work also with people in the faith space. We're working, this is an incredible one. We're working with a couple that actually have been ministering in North Korea for quite a long time, working with children with disabilities in North Korea, and helping them. And it's just amazing because so few people are allowed in there. They have managed to do that. They're about, we're hopefully going back in. That with COVID, they came out. Now they're hoping to go back in. Just an incredible story that we're about to publish later this summer also in that kind of vein, telling their story. We're working with a nonprofit leader. This book's about to come out shortly as well. A book called Compassionate Love by Rick Allen. That one is really telling stories of these people who've just devoted their lives to serving people all over the world and really being the hands and feet of Jesus in all these different environments, and just incredible, compelling stories. We love working with all those. Me personally, I'm working alongside Lewis Howes. We're putting the finishing touches on another book that we're working on with him. I don't want to say too much about it because it's his book. He can talk about it. And numerous others. I mean, we're doing this incredible, partnering with an incredible book on dreaming and the power of dreaming. And there's having honest conversations is another one we're working on right now. The power of that. There's so many, quite honestly. And I know I'm leaving a bunch of really good ones out, but I know one. We have one. This won't come out till 2025. This is about being an empty nester and preparing as a parent to do that. So many people, and especially with this woman, she really has a burden for helping moms in that position. How do you prepare for that? Right? Don't just wait until the last one left. Now what do I do? But it's actually preparing for that transition and that season of life. So we do all kinds of things in that, business books, leadership consultants. I mean, all that stuff. We have a ton of fun doing all of it.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't have any that you were excited to talk about. That's
I know.
Maybe next time.
Here's one here, actually. This book here, What Rules? This one is coming out very soon, like in the next month. This is a Rebecca Young. She's was born in China. Family immigrated to the U.S. And she is a creative, by the way. This is perfect segue because super creative lady, innovator. She's actually, let me get the title right, corporate VP at FedEx in innovation. So she heads up their whole innovation, everything at FedEx is in what she does. And she's written a book called What Rules? How to Think Differently about Success and Cultivate a Happy Life. And she really is. I mean, she's, again, the relationships we develop with our story partners are so genuine and authentic. We actually become friends. Right. And we just had another project wrapped up and this person was like, what, are we not going to talk anymore? Oh no, what's going to happen? So we all try to stay in touch and keep them moving forward too. So
I love that. And when you can work in an environment like that, when you know the people you're working with have your work and your best interest at heart, like that, it's so rare. And so I'm so glad that there is a place in the market for people to find a little respite when they're at the most stressful point of their life and creativity, because sometimes it is a little stressful trying to put your art out there.
It is. Yes. And I would say also, I just had this thought. I mean, this is a podcast for creatives. We're always looking for talented writers who are saying, hey, I want to do some part-time work or whatever the case may be. And I'm curious, is there a writing role that I can develop something or learn as I go and so forth? And so we're always looking for talented people from that perspective too.
That's fantastic. Oh, that's good to know. And I know I can think of several people off the top of my head that I'm like, yep, that would be right up their alley. And so that's great. Okay, so we're at the point of the show where we're going to flip the script and I'm going to hand the show over to you. And you are now the host of Connected Conversations for Creatives.
Awesome. Well, Jen, thanks for coming to my podcast. This is a
Thank you
super
for
creative
having
podcast
me.
that I've made, and it's just awesome. I would like to talk about you,
Okay.
um, and maybe we can talk about this together, like our own journeys.
hmm
How did you become a writer? Like, how did you get to that place? Because you kind of mentioned that it took you a while as well to reconnect with that. It's only more recently, right? So I'm curious to know what has that journey been like for you? Your story of reconnecting to that creativity and then becoming a fiction writer.
Yeah, so I have always loved writing. I mean, I kept diaries and journals and I wrote everything. I'd hear conversations and write them down kind of thing.
Mm.
I always liked writing. I wrote really bad poetry, like I mentioned, and I actually found some when we moved about 6 years ago. I found in our attic and I was like, I can't throw it away, but it definitely needs to be sealed away. And so I sealed it up in an envelope and it's in the attic for maybe one day my kid will
Uh,
find it upon my demise. But
yeah.
I was a I wrote speeches and won contests for public speaking. I mean, it was just all these things. I just always loved writing. But I never knew it was something you could do for a
Mm,
living,
sure.
which is funny because people do it all the time, right? Like, I mean, but I don't guess I ever understood that. I
Right.
would read a book from the library and I'm like, it's just a book that somebody wrote. It never occurred to me that they would make money off
Mm,
of it because I didn't pay for the
mm,
book, right? It came from the library.
sure. Sure.
So, about 3 years ago, I had a dream and I woke up from it and I thought, I wonder how that would have ended because I was not done dreaming it. Like I needed to know how it ended. So I started writing it. I started at the beginning and started writing it. And when I realized I had probably the equivalent of 4 chapters,
Oh wow.
I said, I think I'm going to write a book. And my husband was like, oh, that's so sweet. You know, like that's good. Pat on the head.
Right.
And I was like, okay. And so I did. I
Yeah.
started writing and I spent the next like 3 months just pouring every second into the pages. And I was like, now what do I do with it? Because it was a whole book.
Yeah.
And we were like, how do we find an editor? How do I publish a book? And so it just happened. And
Yeah.
then I had to know how those characters fared. And so I wrote another book. And so it just kind of spiraled out of control.
Yeah. Yeah. In a good way, though.
In
I
a
mean,
great way because
yeah.
I have found one, writing is very therapeutic. It reminds you that you do have permission to say what's happening in your head.
Mm,
Granted, you have to be respectful of the world around you, yes. But
sure.
if you're putting
Sure.
it on the page, I mean, by all means, let it
Right.
free. And you said something earlier in our conversation about not self editing. And that was something that
Yeah.
I did in my everyday life all the time because I always wanted to put my best face forward. I could not have flaws. I needed to get it right the first time or I wasn't going to do it. And that goes even to, this is so silly. When my husband bought his 0-turn lawnmower, he was like, I'll show you how to do it. And I said, nope, you will go
Mhm.
inside, you will leave me on the machine, and I will figure it out now that I've watched you do it because I can't let you see me fail or mess up. And
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
now that I started writing though, and I
Yeah.
realized that editing can come later,
Yeah.
and oh my gosh, the freedom that comes with that.
There's so many wonderful life lessons that we can take from the writing process, from the creative process.
Yes.
When I talk about living a story worth telling, actually, the next book I'm working on is all about that, about living your life as if it were a story that you were telling and that will be told, because that's the reality. Is it is a story that will be told. Right? It will have that, all those things. And so how intentional are we about it when we're writing? You and I are writing, we're getting really intentional about shaping everything, but are we that way with our lives? In most cases, we usually aren't. We just kind of let it happen, and then we don't do any editing at all, right? And so I think there's a lot to be learned there. But so 3 years ago,
Mhm.
you made this turn, and what did that mean for you? What did that involve for you? And how many fears did you have to face in order to do that?
Yeah. So, like, I was even scared to. My husband he's been my best friend since we were 13. So, like, if I could trust anybody, it would be him.
Sure.
And I even was terrified to be like, do you want to read this? Like, are you even interested in something that I imagined? Like, is that a
Mm,
thing?
yeah.
And if you do, you can't talk to me about it for like a week after until I've had time to come to terms with the fact that I've let you read this. And
Right.
he was like, okay. But immediately he was like, this is fantastic. Like, basically, why haven't you done this sooner? And I'm like, I didn't
Mm.
know I could. I didn't know I
Yeah.
had permission, you know? So I think giving myself permission was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and fears to
Yeah.
overcome the
Yeah.
judgment of other people.
Sure. Sure. Well,
Yeah.
that reminds me, I have framed on my shelf over here is I went to an event in Manhattan with Seth Godin many years ago, 12 years ago, maybe now, maybe more. And the theme of the event was pick yourself. It was based on a blog post that Seth had written called Pick Yourself, right? That no one's going to pick you. And to your point, no one's going to give you permission, right? You
Mhm.
have to give yourself permission, right?
Yes.
And that the reality that as creatives, we're often the ones holding ourselves back because that story that we're telling ourselves in our head. And it sounds like when you changed your story, you began to alter your outcome. And I think there's just so much power in controlling that story that we tell ourselves on the inside.
I think what it was more than anything is I changed the narrator in my head, because
Mm,
I had, I grew up, my dad is a pastor still to this day. I grew up in a very sheltered bubble. I was very limited in what I was allowed to read, listen to, say, and who I was allowed to be, honestly.
mm,
And
mm.
having been a pastor and raising kids, you live
Sure,
in a fishbowl, right? It is a
sure,
glass house and everybody
sure.
watches, everybody judges. And so there were expectations on me that weren't on other
Mm,
people. And I didn't understand that growing up. And so it stuck with me. And when I was about
mm.
30, not that long ago, when I was 30,
Sure, sure.
you know,
Yeah, yesterday I think it was,
yeah, I
wasn't it?
think,
Right.
yeah, my birthday, yes, absolutely. About that time, I had something in my head kind of click and say, why is that who you still are? You're not that
Mm,
person anymore. I've
yeah.
grown, I've learned, I've changed. And why would I still want to be that 16-year-old kid who is, repressed? And I'm not saying that I went and ran
Mm,
wild, but I understood
sure.
there was grace and there was
Mm,
freedom to be had when that grace was actually accepted. And so, and it's been a journey since then, because it was 10 years ago, about the
right,
time the
right,
revolution started. But
right.
then when I started writing, I was just like, I found my voice. Sorry. Not sorry.
Mm, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you. I mentioned earlier, what I might tell my younger self on your journey. What message would you have for your, what you said, 14, 16-year-old self back in the day?
Man, I could probably write a book,
There
honestly.
you
Like,
go.
I might know a guy that could help me write that book, but no,
Right.
seriously. Like, I think I would tell myself that other people's expectations are
Mm,
not the expectations you're meant to live up to. There's the expectations that God sets for you. There are
mm,
the expectations that you have for yourself, and there are expectations that, just morality in the world would have you live up to, kind of thing. You have to be a kind and considerate and compassionate person, which, that goes back to standards that God sets. But at the same time, like, those expectations, a lot of the times we build them up in our head to be even more than what
mm,
they actually are. So I
mm.
think,
Yeah.
living with realistic expectations, if I could have explained that to my 13, 14-year-old self in a way that she would have understood, that's what I would tell her. That
Mm,
don't let everyone
that's good.
else's expectations define you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And it's such an impossible dilemma because you could never possibly, well, you can never fully know what those are anyways, right? So
Right.
and they're moving targets,
Yes.
and they're changing all the time, right? So I agree. We often try to do that and it's impossible to fulfill. And then we get frustrated and down on ourselves, which just makes it even worse. So
Yeah, and sometimes
that's great
you
advice.
quit, right? Like, you
Yeah.
just quit because you're like, what's the point at this point? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
No,
hard.
absolutely.
Yes.
Hmm. That's cool. Well, but it does take courage,
Yeah.
like you said. I mean, you had to confront those fears of am I enough? Am I all those things? And I'm just thinking back to because I helped start and then led a private school for a dozen years, and eventually though I had to let that go
Yeah.
because I came to that moment of, hey, am I a writer or am I not? And I'm either
Mhm.
going to write or I'm not. I'm not going to do this halfway thing. And
Yes.
I concluded, all right, someone else has the passion and strengths to run a school better than I can, but no one else can use my gifts in the way that only I can.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, I had to let go of the one and step into the unknown, and the other with 6 kids and, no income. And that's always tons of fun. So,
Oh, yeah.
um, but, and we, it worked, right? Because we kept moving forward by faith, and we went a year with almost no income. But I'd never worked harder in my life than that year. Like, I was always learning, always growing, always writing all the time. And every time moved me closer to that, what, Malcolm Gladwell calls that, 10,000 hours into whatever it is. Right. And now I've left 10,000 way behind. Right. So, but I'm still learning and growing and still looking for new areas to expand and try new things. So.
And you're at that point where it's exciting and you want to, and it's not, I mean, it can be as scary as, you think it, but once you give it a name, like we said earlier, you give it a name and it's not scary anymore, because you're like, the future is the future, and you wouldn't be the person you are if you hadn't had your experiences. So continue forward and make new experiences so you can be the person you're meant to be in the future. That was a lot, but
What she said, yes. Yes.
Like, this is one of those things I can get really passionate about, like finding yourself, finding your voice, and knowing who God made you to be, because that is something that we try to let the world tell us exactly who they want us to be, but it changes. Like you said, it's constantly changing, and who knows who you're supposed to be yesterday and tomorrow. They're totally different people.
And I would just add a single thought to that, which is, I totally agree with everything you said. And I think a lot of people who begin thinking that, they might fall into the trap of thinking, now, if only I could figure out who God wanted me to be, then I could be that person, right? And so, as if there's being a pastor's daughter, right? As if there's like this magic line that you got to stay within those lines, but God's not going to tell you where those lines are, but you better stay in that's not the way he works. That's not the way the world works.
Right.
It's about discovering that as you move forward and enjoying that journey, and to know that, all right, there isn't necessarily a right or a wrong. There might be wise, unwise, best in terms of finding your best path and what your creative and talents are to be done. But, my advice to someone would be, don't live in fear of getting it wrong, right? Live in fear of, not trying to get it right, not trying to move forward. That consequence is far greater. And once you understand that, then you're like, all right, I'm willing to step out, and if I fail, I'll fail forward and learn from it and get back up. As I read every morning, learning from mistakes is the only path to success. So write, edit, write again, edit, write again.
So. Yes, it's a learning process, and it's a process. That's the thing we sometimes forget. It's not just a one and done. It is a process.
So true.
Oh my gosh.
So true.
Okay, well, Bill, thank you for hosting. That was fantastic.
Oh, sure. Well, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for being on the show. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, so tell us how listeners can connect with you and with Story Builders.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I would say, if anybody is listening, like, hey, I don't know if you guys can help me at all. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I don't know. It doesn't matter to us. Just let's talk. Let's figure out if we can. I would encourage you to go to mystorybuilders.com/story. So mystorybuilders.com/story. And you can just book a call time there. It's not a sales call. It's not a pressure call. It's a let's talk and figure out what you're doing and give you some advice and point you in the right direction. That may be all you need. If we can be of service to you, great. If not, we want to get out of the way and let you do that. So I would go to mystorybuilders.com/story. Find us on LinkedIn. You can go on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Bill Blankschaen, Story Builders, is on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram, also Facebook, any of those kind of places. Just use the search function and look for us. Good luck on spelling my last name. That'll be an adventure, but get it close and it'll probably land you there. So, but any of those places, happy to do that. And then if all else fails, just go to our website, mystorybuilders.com, and click, talk to us, and you can find us that way too.
Perfect. And we'll put it all in the show notes, so they won't have to try too hard to spell your last name. It'll be there for them to search, and the click of a link. So, all right, I have one final question. It's the big question. It determines whether you passed or failed today. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let me get us some water, and then let's hear it.
Let's do it. All right. Your big question is, what is one piece of advice or encouragement you want someone to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
I think it would be that how valuable your story is. again, we get so used to this. We devalue our own stories. We think we have nothing to contribute. So many people get stuck in neutral in life because they think everything's been done before. I have nothing left to give. And the reality is, I think of the writer of Ecclesiastes, this wisdom literature, he said there's nothing new under the sun. Everything's kind of been done before. And that's okay, because maybe the ideas have been done before, but you're pulling those ideas together in fresh ways, and then combining it with your story in a powerful way, right here, right now. The fact that it was done before is somewhat irrelevant, because we're not in before and we're not in the future. We're here right now with the same mix of people that we're here right now. We're exactly where we're meant to be, right? And so thinking about what is the value of my story? How can I be intentional about mining my story, pulling those lessons and nuggets and stories out of my imagination and sharing those here and now in a powerful way? I guarantee you, all the people that we think of as the luminaries in our field, the big names and so forth, there was a time that they didn't think of themselves as the big names, and they thought, everything's been done before. Why should I do it? Until you do it, right? And then it's always after the fact. Just like, so many of us have had product ideas. So, we should do this, but then we don't do anything. And then we see it out in the market and it's popular, and we're like, I should have done that. It's that same thing. We don't value our story, and yet we only get a little while to live it, right? And so we're only here for a little while. And so I would say it's live a story worth telling. Oof. Right? Your story is worth living, so make it one that's actually worth telling.
I love that. Yeah, we're all going to leave a legacy, and the story that is told once you are gone,
right.
That will be the story that you lived. So live it well. I love that. I think that's fantastic. Yeah. Bill, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation. I'm leaving I feel like I'm on cloud nine. I'm uplifted. I'm happy. I'm excited. Good. I need to go write something. I need to find a story to tell.
And good has been done here today. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And I hope that somebody will reach out to you and say, I want to build my story with y'all, because I feel like they would be in good hands.
Well, we certainly like to think so. That's certainly what we're told every time we work with anybody. They're like, this is amazing. We actually had somebody that was looking at several different options, and they said, I almost went a different direction, but oh my goodness, I'm so glad I went with you guys, because this has just been a phenomenal experience. But that's what we strive to do, what we do best. And if that's a fit, great.
I love it. All right. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. You too. Appreciate it.
Thank you.